I love how I look like the play and you look like the pleasure.
We do. Well, it's so funny to, like, kick this off and not say, "Hi, I'm Victoria.
I
I'm
know,
Tara."
but we are frequency
We
broads.
are frequency broads.
And welcome. Guess who I am?
I like that I just laugh. I'm like, "No comment." You know whose
No
laugh this
comment.
is.
Don't guess who she is.
Yeah, don't. I dare you.
Welcome to episode 2, Play and Pleasure. I don't know what it's really going to be called yet, but it's about play and pleasure.
Yeah.
And you know why?
Why?
Because Kari inspired us. Um, Real quick, we noticed that, yes, we were very educational in the beginning and that was needed. I re-listened to our intimacy and pleasure one, which was really interesting because it came from a place of talking about identifying shame and letting go of that shame and guilt so we can get into intimacy. And it made me realize, right, especially when we were thinking about what we want to talk about this season, that there's two, obviously everything's a spectrum, yada yada yada, you know this. There's two sides to that spectrum, and one we've talked about is that toxic positivity. We're not here to be toxic, we're not here to be positive all the time, but also the other side of that is just so trauma based and just looking at all the nitty gritty nasty stuff. And there is a place in the middle that Kari really kind of pinged in for me, is that she was saying she doesn't focus her work on trauma. She focuses her work on potentiality, where we want to go. The trauma and the shadow is going to arise, but if we're focused in that direction, it'll shake off, right? It'll come up. We address it. We love it. We thank it. We let it go instead of being so trauma focused. So when we were thinking about what do we want to talk about, I'm like, I want to talk about play. I want to talk about pleasure, and not talking about how it's hard to get into pleasure, but what pleasure gives us and how we can tap into that.
And I think the thing that spurred this topic for me was the idea that, we're adults and there are a lot of things that we have to do because we have to do them, right? And how do we go about living this life of, being mindful, intentional, and wanting to experience pleasure, but doing the things we don't want to do?
Mm,
Um,
mm.
yeah.
So, so that's why we're going to talk about play and pleasure. But before we get into it, freak check,
Freak check.
freak check. How you feeling, boo?
Uh,
Accurate,
Hold
accurate.
on, because I wanna feel different. I wanna change how I'm feeling. Watch me.
I know, I know.
Just watch. Watch the face change.
3, 2, 1.
Hi. I feel really good in my body right now. I'm grounded. I'm rooted. I feel so blessed.
Victoria, I fucking can't. With your
I
hand on your ear and the face you're making, you look like the Mariah Carey, like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
I mean, Mariah Carey, if you wanna shift your mood, just put on some Mariah Carey.
Oh, hell yeah. Any 90s, early 2000s bop is for me, or 80s bop, or you know what? All of it. Give me a
She
bop and
loves
I'll
her
bop to it.
bops.
I love my bops.
Okay, give me your freak
Okay,
check.
freak check. I'm feeling silly.
I like it.
I'm feeling twerky. I'm feeling like my cat keeps meowing outside. I'm feeling like I'm going to write a song about my cat meowing outside like I do every day.
Oh, and wrap it?
I usually do parody songs, so if anyone out there has children or was ever a early educator, Baby Beluga, I remix the shit out of that for my animals, okay? I love taking songs and just impromptu, intuitively singing about what's happening right now. So little Odie meowing outside will get his own hit single. And then I ask Andrew after I'm done, I go, is that good enough for the EP? Most of the time, it's a yes. There are some times where he's like, "That one was flat." I'm like, "You're right. That
I
sucked.
love
We'll
how
try again
blunt
tomorrow."
Andrew is.
I know. But I also love that both of us are so committed to the bit. Like, he's so genuine. Like, he'll look at me and be like, "You know, I really like that one for the EP." And like, am I ever making an EP? No. But like, the bit has been going on for years.
I think inside jokes between couples are so precious.
They are. It's like a little language, you know?
And if you can't make each other laugh, then you definitely can't make each other experience pleasure, right?
Facts. So yeah, that's my freak check. Um, I'm ready. Play and pleasure.
Well, I think something that came up for me is the idea of instant gratification and hormones I think are going to be a common theme this season. And just, the serotonin and the dopamine and all the things that are
Mhm.
released when you get a message from someone you like, or your, online delivery is delivered, and all these ways in which capitalism has fed this idea of instant gratification and that being pleasure. I'm kind of
And like short-term
y-
gratification.
oh, so short that it like becomes numbing almost. You're like,
Mhm.
and sort of, it goes hand in hand. It's very similar to this path that a lot of, spiritual folks will go chasing the next high, like whether they're like, oh my God, I feel so good because I just
Yes.
released this trauma, or like, I want to get high off of my like spiritual bop or my buzz or my like even breath
Spirit.
work or whatever it is. And not to say it's like good or
Yes.
bad, but it's like to be in a state of constantly seeking, you're not able to enjoy what you've created, similar to what you've talked about recently, Tara, your experience of just like looking around and showing gratitude and that reverence for like, oh my gosh, I did this. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think another theme that's been coming up for me a lot lately is like how my present self affects my future self. And right now, like all the decisions that my past self has made to up until this point, and like what are the consequences of my past self not knowing any better and or not listening to my intuition. And I like the concept or the idea that our intuition is our future self coming back to guide us to make
Yes.
better decisions for ourselves.
Mhm. But yeah, like you said, I just experienced that same thing where I'm like, okay, now what's the next step? Now that I got this. And this summer has really been about, or specifically like the break that we've taken from frequency broads, where I was able to just be in my own energy, was really about just like finding the joy in the things that we do daily. So, like, and we've talked about it before, right? Cooking and like all that. Like, and it's so funny too because we are magnets. I mentioned how I got a sun code the other day when I was on a float, and the sun code was we live in an abundant reality. Everything you're always gaining, and it's just whatever, because we're little magnets, whatever you're embodying you're gaining. They don't like, the universe does not understand the concept of I don't want, right? They you're embodying that, and they're like, you are gonna get more. So once I recognize, like, once I put myself in the frequency of joy and play, um I just had all these opportunities to just like find joy and play even from other people. I went on a boat this summer, and my friends, shout out Aurora and Pat, they have this like drink that they call yucca. No, it has nothing to do with the cactus. I don't know why they call it yucca, maybe because it tastes a little yucca sometimes. um and they all turned to me and they were like, Tara, because you're supposed to take turns shaking the whole thing. They were like, Tara, you should like, it's like your little cauldron, like put a spell on it so we all have a good time. And like they were slightly joking, but also still not. And I was like, hell yeah. And like while I was holding it, I was like charging it. And I was like, we're gonna have a great time. And we did. We had a blast. But even out of those experiences, like going on a boat in the middle of a canyon, which was dope, um, just the little fucking things that you do every day and being like, "Oh my god, that was so cute. That was so nice. That was so fun. That brought me so much joy and pleasure." Um, and we're talking about pleasure in all sense of the words, whether it be sexual and intimate or like silly and like the float I went on, so many beautiful things because I didn't have the distraction of screens and other people. It was just me and 3 others, and girl, we saw, you ready for this? Can I just drop my little story?
Mhm.
So we're on our very long float, and it starts right off the bat, like literally as soon as we get in the float with a rapid, and my friend Darren loses her bag. She fucking killed it. She walked through the rapids or like right above them with a stick, crossed the river, grabbed her bag, was like hiking through. We were all like, wow, this is crazy. Like she's a real wild woman. And then we are like, wow, that was so. And again, seeing it from the lens of pleasure and play, we were like, that was scary. That was dangerous. She almost lost her wallet, her keys, her phone. And yet we all had so much fun because we were able to be in that mindset. Right after, we see all these beautiful like little waterfalls and little like it was magical, magical. And Darren goes, "This is where the fairies live." And I go, "Yes, fairies, we love you." Our 4-2 person got rained on by beautiful leaves, just constantly like petals falling on us. And we were like, "Okay, fairies, we hear you." Follow that by an osprey in front of us diving, getting a fish and flying over us a couple times to show us its fish. We saw a turkey vulture fly over to another turkey vulture, and now it could have been like something else, but I swear it opened its wings and stood there holding shade for the other, like on a branch above it, putting shade for the other for a good 5 minutes. Like, it was just like blue herons were like looking at us. We saw a fish jumping out. I was like, this is, and those are all things that happen naturally. Those are things that happen all the fucking time.
Mhm.
Those are things any of us can see. But tapping into that like playfulness of like, oh my God, I just saw a little fish jump out of the water, and like finding pleasure in those small moments, tapping into your heart and being like, this is fueling me because it's making me smile, and taking that moment to pause and say, this feels good, as opposed to looking for the next thing. And I think the reason why we were given so much is because we weren't looking for the next thing. We just kept saying, oh, remember when we saw those 2 baby deer? Remember when you caught your bag? Like, we were all like just reminiscing and sitting in that potency of like joy and pleasure. And then boom, something else would come because that's the frequency we're holding. It was so beautiful. It was so much fun.
That sounds super beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I was wondering, Tara would just like leave on all these like trips, and I'm like, how was it? And it was like I didn't really get an update for the voice here, the mouth, right? Like she,
I
but
know.
here, good. I'm getting it with all of you in real time.
Yes. Yes, yes,
Amazing.
yes.
But there's so much subtlety to receiving pleasure, receiving joy, and you have to get rid of the consumer mindset, the like things
Mhm.
outside of myself are going to make me feel a certain way. It's more like I feel good in who I am and how I'm presenting my energy to the world, and the world is going to present something really beautiful to you. And if it doesn't, I mean, sometimes it's, well, we don't have to go down that topic because I'm done talking about downtown Portland. It's just the
Mm.
contrast of being in like a high vibe state, right? Which is gives me the spiritual ick. And I really want to talk about my experience just feeling just very
Icky?
turned off by spiritual
Yeah.
concepts, even spiritual, just the way it's presented on social media. I think Tara and I from the beginning have been like, we're not content creators. And I had this realization over break where I'm like, yeah, actually,
We
we
are.
create content. But I think when it comes to like posting on Instagram and playing the algorithm game and like, are we putting out content for us? Or are we putting it out for our listeners or our viewers or the people who follow us on
Mhm.
like who are we doing this for and why? And like, does it feel good for us to create what we're creating and put it out into the world, whether or not we receive validation? And so I've been really sitting in
Yes.
the vibration of validation and
Mm.
receiving because it's like, on one hand, you want people to see your energy and where you're at in your evolution. But if they're not at that state of consciousness and they're not able to perceive you, that validation is not going to happen. And that's why it's so important
Absolutely.
to practice discernment, especially during the season of fall. And I think reflecting on where you're putting your energy. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I really feel that when you said like we are content creators, there was this moment of dread to be
yeah,
I'm going
yeah.
to be completely frank. Like Victoria and I did how do I say this? Like it's not that we didn't sign up for this cuz clearly we did, right? We're doing it. But ultimately we signed up for sharing what we're capable of sharing at any given moment and respecting our own bodies. And I think what capitalist has done to a lot of our passion and play and pleasure, oh, passion, play, and pleasure, um, is said, okay, sure, you can tap into that, but then we're gonna drain the shit out of you. And it's this weird thing that I think we're all kind of coming up upon, especially after 2020 when we all realized like the structures we have like just don't work for us, and a lot of us have become entrepreneurs or content creators or just finding our own path. And it's this weird duality of like, but if I make this my job, this now becomes a job which becomes daunting because a job is a job is a job no matter what it is, and nobody wants to show up for a job, right? Like we said in our last episode, there are times where we don't want to show up to record because we're tired, but we do it because we know in our heart and in our gut this is what we're meant to do. And sometimes you got to push through it. And but the only way to push through it is to take the moment to breathe and say, well, let's find the pleasure in this moment. So even when we sat down to record the first episode and we were both like, whoo, we're out of practice, we haven't been here, we were like, you know what, let's just have a little fun with it. And I think that's where we're coming with our content as well. Is yeah, we're not as frequently posting as the algorithm wants us to, or you may want us to. But we're trying to do it in a way that's authentic to ourselves and a way that we bring pleasure to it and say, actually, this was really fun to create this kind of post, or this was easy for me. That's why I do a lot of speaking posts because I'm like, "Ah, this is fun and this is easy. I could just pop on."
Mhm.
But there's a lot of things that we're still navigating. How do we bring pleasure into something that innately doesn't typically bring pleasure? Me being on social media does not innately bring me pleasure. And I need to navigate that and find the joy. And we do that by following our authentic self instead of what capitalism or the algorithm or whoever tells us we have to do that.
I love that you've brought joy to your feed. Well, our feed, we our shared account, right? By following a bunch of fabulous drag queens that are I like log on and I'm like,
Yes.
when do we start following this person? I'm
Oh my God. I
obsessed.
follow so many
I
drag
know.
queens because I love drag queens. I just love them so much because we're all born naked and then the rest is drag, right? So like even if you're not a drag queen, I love that line because we are born naked and all the rest is just what we want to create. And once we can tap into that, once we can be our authentic self, be the child, the inner child that we want to be, present ourselves in ways that are fun, right? We don't need to be that type of person or that type of way all the time. We can play, we can shapeshift, and that is so much fun. We can shapeshift our bodies, our face, our hair, our environment to fit our mood. And that's another way of bringing pleasure. I fucking reorganize my house all the time, even if I just like turn the table differently, because I'm like, I need to shift things up. I want to have a little fun. I want to redecorate. So, drag queens, you inspire the shit out of me. Queer people in general inspire the shit out of me, myself included, because you're just living your damn life. And that is what brings you pleasure.
Amen. And so it is. I want to go back to what you just said about pushing through or rallying or whatever. And I think it's really important to acknowledge when you are pushing through on whatever it is that you know you're doing it because it's ultimately going to make you feel good. Like
Yes.
exercise or us
Yes.
logging on to do this podcast. I know I'm going to feel really, really good once we're done, but that like anticipatory buildup of
Yeah.
like the unknown or the like, am I going to present my best self or whatever the hell comes up? It's like, let's only rally for what brings us pleasure.
Yes. Yes, and I think we do that. Victoria, you said this the other day, so I'm sorry I'm stealing your line, but I'm giving you credit. Um, you were talking about your relationship to people, but this is our relationship with anything, our jobs, the way we interact with others, whatever. Recognize how you feel in the moment and how you feel when it's over or when they're gone, right? And if we're talking about it in the form of pushing ourselves through to make content or to show up in a certain way, think in that moment, how do I feel when it's actually happening?
Mhm.
And how am I going to feel after it's over? My cat just jumped out of its seat. He was like, "Yes, you're right." Um,
I'm right.
because
I'm just kidding.
you're right, Victoria. No, you are because that's your insight, but it's so true, right? Before coming on to record or make content, I may feel dread because I'm like, because that's the judgmental part of me. Oh God, what if this is going to take a lot of work? What if they don't like it? What if it doesn't get a lot of views? But if I stop and pause and say, well, how does it feel to make that? And if the answer is it doesn't feel good, then that's not the content I want to create. But if it's actually, I really enjoy after, I feel really proud after I make that thing, even though it may feel daunting to start. So thank you for bringing that into my life.
And I just you're welcome, and I don't like doing things just for the sake of doing them. Like, can we just
Mm-hmm.
mm, no. No, 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 no. Well, I think this whole idea came up because I was thinking about new relationship energy and when you first start dating someone and you kind of I'm such a romantic. I love to be in love, and I kind of become
Love,
obsessed, right?
love.
And so I think learning to observe who I am in the presence of the person, but then when I'm in their apps or they're in my absence, I'm in their absence, both, same, same. Um,
Both.
like, how do I feel anxious? And anxiety is such
Mm-hmm.
a great tool in letting us know if something's right for us or not. It's also a little bitch, but
Well, I mean, I guess it depends because, like, where's the anxiety coming from in a sense? Like, are you ruminating on the same thought over and over? Because that's not really giving you the alarm. Or is it just that one alarm where you're like, this doesn't feel safe, this doesn't feel right? It's like a weird, I totally agree with you, but it's also a weird thing, right? It's like when we said running clear filters. Like, if you're
mm,
running clear
mhm.
filters, you can trust it. But if you're in a lens of trauma, you can't. It's a wishy washy washing machine of emotions.
Right, and I think we're just not wanting to that's like spiritual bypassing at its finest, right?
Yes. And we hate spiritual bypassing.
Well, yeah. I'm like, how do I even begin to describe just my ick? And I feel like that's all I've been able to say is like spiritual ick, right? Like, but I think
Yeah.
I've come to this point where I've had a lot of amazing teachers, whether they've been in my life and I've gotten to work with them in person, or I've just received their words via books or YouTube or whatever the case may be.
Barbara.
Barbara, shout out Barbara,
Barbara.
Barbara and Pleiadians. Um, what?
You were saying that you've worked with many great teachers and spiritual
Yeah,
ick
well, and
and
I think I'm such a loyal person in knowing when it's time to move on and say, "Thank you, I've received what I needed from you. I'm gonna carry on," right? And not have that guilt because I think we become so invested in the people that, like, feed us spiritually, right? It's like, watching a little dog,
mhm.
like, be obsessed with its owner mostly because it feeds it, right?
Oh
But, like,
my
that's I
god.
think how I felt for
Love those
so
videos.
long, right? Like, I just wanted to be fed spiritually, and now I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm doing a liver cleanse. I'm,
I'm ready to get rid of all this shit. Thank you.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
appreciate you giving it to me. I used it and now we'll get rid of the rest.
I think it I like the phrase, "Don't yuck your yum." Don't yuck or
Yes,
if
I love
you're
I tell the
right?
kid,
Yeah,
"Don't yuck someone else's yum." I
yes.
tell the students that all the time because it's like we've always said in every fucking season, every fucking episode, you gotta find what resonates with you, but judging other people for what resonates with them. You talked about being able to see or perceive only a certain capacity, right? And I just read this thing which was like when there I think there's like a name for it. So if y'all know it, you can comment it below. But it's like a thing where you look if you don't know how to identify trees or identify plants, when you look at a forest, all you're going to see is bush, tree, flower.
Mhm.
and because that's all you're able to perceive. So that's all you see. And once you're able to perceive and understand and have the knowledge of all the other types of plants, you see fern, mugwort, plants, whatever other fucking plants there are in your area, and you're able to perceive and understand more. So it's that same kind of concept of like not yucking someone's yum because they might not be able to perceive bigger or outside of that or what have you.
Yeah, and I think the spiritual ego plays such an interesting role in this topic because you think you get to this point where you've like received so much information, you've integrated, you've released, you've done, you've just kind of gone through the cycle many, many times. And
Mhm.
not resonating with something any longer does not mean that you're more spiritually advanced or your like soul is more evolved,
Yes.
right? Because I
Or
think,
more
well, we can't,
enlightened.
like, I just don't think it's serving anyone to look at it in that lens any longer. And I think I did for a while. I was a bit of a spiritual snob in the sense of like I didn't really I knew the term yuck your yum or whatever, but there was this part of me that I was very much judging people for where they're at and what energy they're putting out there. And when I really sat with it and felt into like what is it that's really pissing me off about what this person is saying, um it yes, a lot of it had to do with me and my own projections kind of mirroring off the
Right.
person's words, but then also as a spiritual practitioner, understanding the role and the responsibility that we have to not project our own shit onto other people that we're working with and to very
Mhm.
clearly, and I think when your channels are clear and you're very very attuned to like other people's energies, you see and feel other people's projections like instantly. And I think it's a beautiful blessing and gift that I have this, and I know you have this too, Tara, but like you gotta just take it for what it is or, like, take elements of it or be like, "No, thank you,
Yeah.
this isn't working for me," and not, like, ruminate in the fact that it doesn't resonate.
Right. And we're all human. We're all going to go through shit. Like, no matter how much work we do, talk about like a spiritual hierarchy, right? Like, I also had that same feel. And it didn't feel at the time that it was coming from judgment. It was just like, why aren't you doing this? Like, you would be so much happier because like I know better. And it's like, I don't know shit because I don't know what you've been through in this life and another life.
Yeah.
So it's really just being able to, understand we are one. And if we are one, there is no hierarchy. If we are one, we're able to have more flexibility and understanding. And as far as like not projecting, it's just about being honest. It's just about saying like as a spiritual practitioner, as someone who's trying to have others cultivate more play and pleasure, bringing it around. That's my favorite thing to do. Just say to them, "Hey, I'm going through something right now. I need a break." Because I am going to project onto you, as opposed to like hiding that part of you because you want to be the spiritual leader, be above the negativity or be above the need for healing. Like, just fuck, just fucking say it. Just say, I am going through this cycle right now and I need a break, whether it's from content creation or maybe I'm still working with you, but just know that it's going to be a little challenging. Just being open and honest. Yeah.
Which is interesting, receiving that from, the person that you're working with, that you're paying, you know I think for so long we've been conditioned to think that the person that we're going to for advice, like our Sherpa, right? Like has to know more than us. They have to
Mhm.
be that guiding light, that guiding what's that called? A lighthouse? I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, yeah, lighthouse,
Um
lighthouse.
but it's
Mhm. Light.
um sorry if you're not on YouTube watching us.
Ugh, you just missed our little lighthouse dance. Get it, girls. Be the lighthouse.
All right. I just want to close out the whole spiritual ick comment so I don't have to keep revisiting it because I'm still like searching for words, but I think I'll leave it at this. I'll say this every freaking season, but practicing discernment is so key. And actually, the season of fall, and I know we talked about fall in the last episode, but it is still fall. We're now 1 week into fall. Nearing
Happy
nearing the
fall.
end of September. Yeah, it's a beautiful, crisp, rich time. But I think
Discernment.
yeah, well, I know, and I discernment is just discernment without judgment.
Yes. Yes.
It
And I
feels
think
better, right?
that's
Like, I'm just like, how
yeah.
can we not like, I like that we get these hits, we get these clear clues of things that work and don't work, but, like, how do we
Mhm.
release the, like, the ick that comes with us not resonating with something and just quickly being
Yeah.
able to say, "No, thank you. That is not for me."
Yeah. Well, it's because that's the breadcrumb right there is you got to have non-judgment when you're discerning because you're understanding that it's just not for you. Not that it's good, bad, or indifferent. It's just not for you. And when you're able to release judgment, you have fluidity and you can find play in that, right? Like you can find the humor. That's something that I've really been working with is finding the humor in everything, even the really big struggles, even when I have to cut ties, being like, whoo, like stepping out of myself and being like, damn, that's actually kind of funny in the grand scheme of things that like I had to go through that. And that's where we find play. And I think play, tapping into play and pleasure is this like freedom and liberation from structures that no longer serve us. So that's where discernment comes in because you're like, all right, the structure isn't working for me and I can be really rigid or I could be judgmental or I could be a little playful and humorous with it and just be like, ba-ba-da, I'm going to shimmy away cuz this doesn't work for me today. And like, right? That's for the EP. No, that one was lame. But
No, that's our
um
intro right there.
I love it. Thank you for supporting me and not yucking my yum and allowing me to play and have pleasure. But let's shake off the yuck and the yum and really dig a little bit deeper into play because I feel like for me, I've been experiencing more pleasure because I've been in a container that's safe enough to play in. And I recognized that the thing that gets me going the most, if you know what I mean, is laughter. When Andrew makes a joke or he's being silly or what I call carefree Andrew, like he'll do something stupid and childlike and it'll make me laugh and then I'm immediately like, "All right, are we going or what?" Like that is my emotional foreplay. Like there's so many different ways to foreplay and with your friends too, right? It doesn't need to be a sexual thing, but like bringing pleasure and intimacy into your friend groups. Like when you feel comfortable, when you have that safe container, then you're able to explore different facets of pleasure.
Hmm. Pleasure for me is such a sensory experience, and I love laughter. I love the curiosity. I love the childlike wonder, right? But I'm such an intellectual and I need to be stimulated mentally. But
Mm.
going from that point of being stimulated mentally to then being stimulated other ways, I think the biggest challenge a lot of people face is that they're so in their heads when in moments of experiencing pleasure and thinking it needs to be one way or another, or they're so concerned with how they appear or how they, taste or smell or how they're being received, right? Another way validation shows up. And if you're not well versed in communicating how you like to be received or how you like to receive, it can create a disconnect. And I think the whole point is understanding that we're doing these acts of play and pleasure to connect and to exchange energies with one another, and the
Mhm.
responsibility that comes with sharing energy, whether it be in a friend group, playing, laughing, or otherwise. I
Yeah,
like how
well,
hold on,
it's
I like how I said cum load in the last season, but now I'm like not yeah, I'm not saying sex.
yeah, you're like, "Ew, taboo." Um, but something that I did since the last episode on intimacy, because that was a lot of it, right? Getting out of your head, how do I taste, smell, see, like whatever. Um, I took this class called Living Altar of Pleasure, and it was really interesting. And I know I've talked to Victoria and a lot of people about the realization of what it actually means to receive and exploring whether that be something playful or very pleasurable, how your relationship to receiving and the concept of receiving is this is for me and it's about me, right? Like I am receiving this. But what happens when we receive is the first thought is how is that other person feeling? If I'm receiving some kind of physical pleasure, my first instinct is to be like, are they enjoying it? Are they okay? Right? And it's reframing that to say, no, this is about me right now. And they'll have their moment when I'm in the space of giving to receive. And if they're giving me something, let me bask in that. Let me
Mhm,
enjoy it.
mhm.
Let me feel that pleasure. There's a great game from this book, Giving and Receiving. I'll put a link below. It's called the 3 minute game. Actually, it takes 12 minutes. And I've been waiting to do it with Victoria. We just haven't gotten around to doing
Oh,
it.
cool.
Yeah. And it's trying to play with how it feels to actually receive just for yourself and how it feels to give for someone else. And you work with a partner and you take turns asking 2 questions. So if Victoria and I were playing, I would ask Victoria, how do you want me to touch you for 3 minutes? And she's in charge of saying that. I obviously have to accept there is consent, right? It's not just like whatever you say. But then my focus is all on what she wants to receive for 3 minutes. And her focus is just receiving it, not thinking about if my hands hurt from the massage or whatever. Then I ask again, how do you want to touch me for 3 minutes? And then that experience of receiving what she wants to give me. And it's a really interesting thing because that's when I realized that I'm actually not good at receiving things. I'm always thinking about the other person. And that comes from compassion, and that's okay, and that's beautiful. But once we start to play around with our understanding of receiving, we can actually enjoy our life much more because we don't have that little nagging thing in the back like, well, what if they get mad at me? Or what if they don't like it? Or what if they're not happy? And it's like, if someone's offering you something, take it, receive it. If it resonates with you, obviously, like discernment, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But then that practice creates a safe container to do some exploring that maybe you were nervous about trying this type of touch or this type of emotional or intellectual intimacy or foreplay. Like start to feel safer because you're not concerned about the other person and you can actually voice what you want, which is what's been happening in my relationship, which has been really nice. We've been able to set a safe container where we are open to receiving from the other person and are interested in giving what the other person wants instead of just allowing what's happening. You know what I mean?
And, well, it goes back to validation and learning your partner's preferred way to be validated.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, play takes practice.
Play takes practice. So you got to get into that inner child. Why do you think I'm wearing my preschool shirt, my pigtails? You got to get into that inner child and be creative, be playful, go on the swings. Victoria and I just realized we both love the swings. We ain't never been on the swings together.
Facts.
Laughing together is a fucking crazy medicine. But you do that with a safe container. So you got to discern who you feel safe with and not.
Mhm.
I know, Victoria, you've talked about having like a massage buddy, right? You can only do that when you feel safe with somebody.
And you know it's not going to turn sexual, right? Like, having those boundaries of, like, I'm going
Yeah.
to honor your body and respect that it doesn't have to be anything other than what it is.
Yeah. And I think exploring physical pleasure outside of like like finishing or sex itself is such a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I I
Like massage
I just wanna
buddies.
see more intimacy in the world, and I think that's what we're all really craving, and, that article that came out a few months ago about how, like, men are so incredibly lonely, I think a lot of us kinda laughed at it at first, and we're like, "Well, you, like, create your own bed or whatever," and I wanna acknowledge just, like, wait, is September Suicide Prevention Month? But the
I
suicide
think
rates of
so.
men are just increasing,
Mhm.
um, and I so see it as a lack of touch, of having, and I really see this, like, need for the feminine energy to come into so many lives, but in this way that we haven't really been programmed to see it or feel it, and
Mhm.
we're out here trying to represent, not trying, we're out here representing this
Hell yeah,
new
we are.
divine, feminine energy, and it's really, I think, more than anything, integrating our wounded masculine right along with you, so
Mhm. Mhm. And I think you're right. It comes from, you need to have a level of vulnerability, and in order to like find the safe container and experience like deeper pleasure and like being able to physically touch. And for a long time men have been told that they cannot be vulnerable. So it's real, and still a lot are told that they cannot be vulnerable. So it is, I feel, really challenging for
mhm.
men to be able to experience that type of pleasure without the sex, without the climax, without that kind of stuff. I mean, you say massage buddy, that takes me right back to high school, and early college when I would go back home. And me and my friends that knew each other for really long, we would just hang out, and all of a sudden someone would be like, massage train, and we'd all be, and none of it was sexual, right?
Yeah,
It would all
yeah,
just be, let me touch you, let me show that it's safe for you to be held and for me to support you, and because I know you're going to do the same for me.
mhm.
But you need to be in a safe container and allow yourself to be vulnerable. Then the playfulness and pleasure comes into that.
Amen, yes, for sure. I wanna go back to the idea that I brought up, the idea of having a massage buddy, and I think I posted it
Mhm.
on, my social media and was like, "Oh my gosh, why is this not a thing?" Like, I know that hookup culture is that, you just get together to have sex, but I'm like, "Let's start to normalize getting together for the sake of exchanging touch and intimacy."
Mhm.
And a lot of people responded. It sparked a whole conversation with people that I'm like,
Oh, really?
"Oh, yeah," from one end of the spectrum of it being very sexual to then a lot of people being like, "This already exists. It's a, like, cuddle buddy service where you pay someone for touch." Like, I think we've seen it, like, it was on the news a few years ago, right? So
Oh, okay, yeah.
right, and that got me thinking about, that's a transactional relationship, right? And I think
Mhm.
transactional relationships are really, sort of this, like, surface level way of creating boundaries between you and another person, but it's also strangely healthy because you know the intentions and you know what the other person wants and you're giving it to them, and then that's what it is. It's transactional, but how do we start looking at our relationships as being more transformational and not as transactional?
Yes.
And I
Yes,
think
I love
also
that.
there's another way to look at transactional relationships where it it can be an equal exchange of energy. It doesn't necessarily always have to involve money, right? Or
Mhm.
whatever the give and take is, but I'm all for transactional and transformational because at least if the transactional component is there, there's some sense of equanimity. Is that the right word? Equanimity?
Equ equidi
No,
wait.
equanimity means fuck me, hold on.
Equality? No, I know what you're trying to say, but I don't think it's
No, equanimity never means what I think it means. It means mental calmness, composure, evenness of temper.
oh,
Um,
that's not at all what I
right,
thought it
but
meant.
I guess reciprocity is the word I'm wanting to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that feels right.
Yeah.
I think we all know what you meant, but now you taught us a new word. Thank you.
Yeah. I want next vibe check or freak check, equanimity will be I want that state to be how I'm coming in.
All right, you heard it here. Let's see if it's gonna match
Yeah,
next
I'll
week.
probably forget.
But you know what? I think you're right. It could be a beautiful thing, and I think this cuddle service or whatever it's called is a good way to start if you're nervous, because someone's kind of already set that boundary for you. Like you said, the boundaries are there, but it's also empowering to set the boundaries yourself. So when you're ready, inviting people that you trust and saying, I don't want this to be sexual, or maybe you do, whatever it is, right? I don't want this to be this, or I don't, even if it's just, I don't like to be touched in this way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, I love being tickled, but other people don't like being tickled, right? And being able to state that confidently, right? That 3-minute
That's
game.
hold on, that's so funny because I was tickled last night and I can't state that calmly. I'm like, "Get your fucking hand off of me. I'm gonna slug you across the face." So, don't ever try to tickle me. Love ya, but don't.
Right.
Yeah.
And w- so like so many different parts of our bodies like to be touched in a different way, right? Gain pleasure in a different way. And when we practice receiving, right? Whether it's in that 3-minute game or just like you're observing yourself, once you recognize this is what I want to receive, it's so much easier to then state that you want something different.
Mhm.
Because maybe I wanted a massage and now this isn't feeling good anymore, even if normally it does. And because I'm in the space of receiving and I know it's about me, it feels more comfortable to say, actually, can you not do that anymore? Can you do this instead? Or can you move over here? As opposed to being like, oh, I don't want to be annoying because they're already doing this for me and I don't want to make them upset. And it's like, no, it's about you, baby. Feel the pleasure. And when you have that comfortability and you're able to state those boundaries, again, it's growth, it's liberation, it's freedom because you're not living in constructs that you feel society or this other person is putting on you. You're doing it for yourself. So I like that cuddle buddy thing that like you can pay for. Like that's a great way to start if that's where you need to be, but practice setting your own boundaries and finding people you feel comfortable enough
Well,
exploring
also
that.
practice being able to effectively communicate your boundaries in a matter of fact
Mm,
way and remove the
yes.
aggression and emotion, speaking to myself right now. Because that's the thing, I think for so long we've been pressed and pressed and pressed to the point where we've, I think, resisted stating our boundaries. And
Yeah.
that's why it bubbled for me personally, and why it's bubbled up because I've been such a people pleaser. By the time it comes up where I'm like, this doesn't work for me, I'm like full fledged dragon raging.
No, you're right. I think a lot of us experienced that, right? Like we held ourselves together and then we felt like we needed to fight. Or the opposite, where we're very passive and it's like, is it okay? And if you're asking if it's okay, that person has every right to say, no, I don't want to do that for you, which they always do, right? Of course. But then you're not actually stating what you want or stating that boundary.
Mhm.
Like, it's okay if you don't want to, or you understood that, right? Like, just say it like, "I don't like that. Can you do this instead?" And not taking it personally when they're like, "No, I can't do that for you." And then you go, "Okay, well then we're going to put a pin in this for now and we'll come back or now it's your turn." Um but it's hard to get the emotion out of that for sure. But if you bring in play and humor, it is a lot easier.
Well, okay, so I've had some people say that their therapists have told them that they use humor as a way to avoid feeling, and I think there is sort of this fine line, and I wanna acknowledge it, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I had never thought about that, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, maybe I do that sometimes. Maybe I use humor to avoid just how awful the situation is."
Well,
Thoughts? Yeah.
I think it's recognizing avoidance,
But
right? So like if you
is it
recognize that.
avoidance or is it a
Well, I
shift
think
of
it could.
perspective?
Well, I think that's the difference though, because there are people who use humor to avoid their feelings, right? Haha, that's not that bad. Or there are people who can find perspective and be like, oh no, literally, it's not that bad. So again, it's that concept of clear channels. Are you sitting there and avoiding and you're like, I'm scared to approach this, so I'm just going to make a joke about
Yeah.
it? Or did I come to the realization that my emotions got the best of me and I just needed to release those? And I'm sorry, this is actually not that big of a deal. Something that I have really been focusing on, and like Andrew and I just did a big check-in. My mom laughs at me because I give Andrew homework every couple of months to do like a check-in with each other, but it works really well for us, especially for me. um, and Normally, when Andrew and I do our check ins, it's usually because things are starting to bubble up
Mm.
and then the energy is running us, right? We're like getting emotional and we're like, this is the energy and I need to get it out and I need to tell you how I've been feeling. And this time I was really mindful of us running the energy instead of the energy running us. And I was like, okay, let's take some time individually to check in with ourselves, come back with our homework. We like breathed together first. We talked about how everything we're saying is coming from our own perspective and to take nothing personally. And after we like danced and shook together to release the energy. So I think when it comes to avoidance versus perspective, it's just recognizing like, is the energy running you or are you running the energy? Are you reading the energy and saying, okay, this is how we need to maneuver this? We need to bring some humor and lightness and play? Or am I feeling the energy and it's making me avoid and I'm just using other things to get rid of it?
I love an open-ended question pause and breathe. You know, through the whole process of just getting rid of shit and being a very conscious consumer and not letting things outside of me guide how I feel, um, but rather being influenced and, tuning into that muse energy and looking for the people, places, and things that make me feel alive and inspired. Um, it's all in the subtleties, and I think having been in this state of hypervigilance for a lot of my life, and I feel like growing up really fast, whether it be just because I was just very attuned to the energies around me and observant and just I was tapped in. And I think when you're super aware at a young age, you don't really get to live that like ignorance is bliss experience that
Hmm.
I've always envied in others. And it's taken me a really long time to be like, wow, that's just not part of your path. Like, I'm
Hmm.
now really owning my responsibility and just what I chose my life to be like. And that's in the realms of death and transformation. Hold on, let me take a sip here. Rub my bum around because she's like numb. You know, sitting at a desk all day long in front of a computer has been incredibly draining, and I'm realizing more and more and how I need to just working 8 hours straight just ain't for me. And my butt like literally is like the first indicator of being like time to get up, walk around, get some blood flowing, but your glutes, your hips, I mean, talk about pleasure, right? Like, and that's why my girl is
Hmm.
always twerking. There's so much
Hell
energy
yeah,
stored in
bitch.
this region, especially for women.
Ugh.
Well, no, I mean, whatever gender you are,
Everyone,
everyone.
everyone, that is your kundalini energy rising right there.
Well, but from a musculoskeletal like perspective, from
Muscular.
from a musculo, hold on, musculoskeletal,
Musculo.
musculo.
From an anatomy
I mean, that's where
standpoint.
trauma's stored, and that's where
Mm.
I mean, think okay, I want you to this is your little homework assignment from me to you, whether it just be you, Tara. Give this one to Andrew too, because like you like his butt. But throughout the day, observe how often you are clenching your freaking butt. And let that be a
Interesting.
reminder to breathe and to anchor into your hips and to relax and maybe shake your hips a little bit. Like, I notice that when I'm cooking or doing dishes or I'm like concentrating on something, I'm like,
Your
stop.
butthole's like,
Well, yeah. And everything around it too, where I'm like, this is what made
let it
that's where
go.
the whole word asshole probably came from was people just who have a freaking tight butt. Yeah, exactly.
Tight butthole.
Relax. Let it
That
go.
was a thing saying. That was a thing saying? That was a saying growing up. Tight butthole? Did you say that growing up?
I don't know. Say what?
It would be like, "Why are you getting butthurt?" or "Why are you tight butthole?"
I don't
What
know. We
is
did
that?
not
That's
say
so
tight
fucking
tight
funny.
butthole,
That's
but
so funny. Or like, yeah, I don't know. That's so fucking funny, honestly.
because we
You're
knew,
so
right?
tight butthole. Oh, I'm gonna be looking. I'm gonna be looking at everybody's asses as I'm looking around. I'm like, is that clenched or what?
You know what, Tara? You need to just focus on your fine ass.
Listen, my ass is never clenched, bitch. Okay? She out here shaking all the
I'm
time.
like, let's bet on
She's
this.
loose. All right, I'm gonna tally it. You think I won't? I
I
will. I'm gonna
know. You
tally
know, I
it.
want the data.
I'm gonna come back with homework.
I want graph charts.
On Monday, my butthole was clenched this many times. Here's my plot and line graph.
Mm.
See, we just got to find the humor in things, guys. I mean, I feel like a wise woman once said, "It's serious, but you don't have to be." But that wise woman was always fucking
She
serious.
was.
Like, right? Like shit. I know I said probably in season 1 that oh my god, it's only been in one fucking calendar year. That's crazy. My New Year's resolution was to bring in more pleasure. Girl, I have. Um but now, like, I've kind of shifted that a little bit and I'm focusing on not taking anything personally. And that has made life so much more playful. Because when I recognize everything else going on around me literally has nothing to do with me. I affect everything around me, and everything else can affect me if I let it. And sometimes I do if it's in a positive way or it feels juicy and it feels good. But ultimately, it's all going through all your other lenses of shit. So I don't have to take anything personally. I take responsibility for how I treat others and how others respond to me and to an extent. But ultimately, like, especially at my job, especially being a content creator, I'm like, I don't take it personally. You don't listen? Great. Andrew never has. If I took that personally, we would have had trouble a long time ago. But it is what it is, baby. You just gotta have a little laugh, a little butt shake, a little twerk. You know what I mean? You gotta let it go.
What's your advice to our listeners to not take things personal?
Breathe first, right? You got to center yourself first. You can't immediately just be like, it has nothing to do with me. Because you're angry or you're upset. Breathe first, come back to yourself, and then ask yourself, does this really have to do with me?
Mm.
Because if someone's like, you punched me and that hurt, like, I'm not going to be like, sorry, that's your problem. That's your
I feel
perspective,
like
right?
you've
Like,
said that before.
well, I definitely have, but I've
Yeah, baby
grown.
Tara.
That was baby Tara. Um, but now I could sit there and be like, okay, does it actually have something to do with me? Was it actually my actions that I need to take responsibility for? Most of the time it's not. And then at that point, I just breathe and I say, not to them, because that'll just piss them off, right? This has nothing to do with me. But in my own heart and head, I can say, don't take this personally. This is a reflection of what they're going through. And I can't judge them for that because I've been there too. So, and that's where you find a little playfulness, right? Because it's not judgment. It's not like, oh, you're projecting. It's
No.
just like, oh man, you fell down the
No,
slide.
you're honoring
Yeah,
where
it's
they're at, and
okay.
I think it's so important
Yeah,
that we begin to practice honoring where people are at and letting it be just that. Did that rhyme?
where they're at. Letting it be just that. Where they're at. Be just that. Where they're at. There's a great
My
song.
favorite New York rapper right here.
Hmm. Sorry, Busta.
Sorry, 50
um, there's a
or Lil'
great
Kim.
song.
Sorry, but she is the
I
greatest.
honestly forget. I forget who it's by because it's a new artist, but I'll link her below. And her song is all like, I danced to it on our Instagram the other day. It's all just like, those problems are small. It's not about me at all. I just stay in my lane. And I'm like, facts, bro. Facts. Just stay in your lane. And if you skeet out of your lane and hurt somebody, you apologize. You give them your insurance. You're like, girl, I got you. I'll cover that shit up.
But
And then you
never
get back in your
admit
lane.
fault on the scene. Just kidding.
It was never me. I swear.
No, that is the time you do admit fault, so,
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's 111.
It is 111. So we hope that you go out there and you find safe containers with your friends, with yourself, with your partners to explore a little bit more of what pleasure means to you in all ways, intimacy, in intellect, emotional, physical, and how you play, tapping into that inner child to find what lights up your soul so that way you can find a little humor and perspective into the big kind of nasty things we experience.
And food. I'm gonna go pleasure myself through food.
As always, girl.
I love you. Until next
I love
time. See you
you.
next week.